What if everything you thought about reality, about yourself, about the world was backwards? We live our lives believing we are something, that we have an identity, a purpose, a core essence that defines who we are. But what if that essence isn't something we're born with? What if, instead of being something, we are simply existing, figuring ourselves out as we go? This is the central question of one of the most mind-bending debates in philosophy: the battle between essence and existence. For centuries, philosophers have struggled with a fundamental question: do we have a built-in essence before we exist, or do we exist first and then create our own essence? It's a question that changes everything: how we see identity, free will, and even the meaning of life itself. On one side, we have thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, who argued that essence comes first. A knife is meant for cutting, a bird is meant to fly, and humans must have some kind of predetermined essence that gives them purpose. But then, thousands of years later, an idea shattered this way of thinking, an idea so radical that it changed philosophy forever. It came from existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, who made a shocking claim: existence precedes essence. In other words, there is nothing written about you before you are born. No grand blueprint, no divine plan. You exist first, and only then do you define who you are. But here's the real question: if we are not born with a fixed essence, how do we create ourselves? And what happens when we refuse to? Because according to existentialist thought, freedom can be terrifying, and many people spend their entire lives running from it. The clash of philosophies: are we born with a purpose? Since the dawn of human thought, philosophers have been obsessed with one fundamental question: do we have a purpose before we are even born? To most people, the answer seems obvious. How could we not? We look around and see a world full of things that all seem to have a purpose. A tree grows to provide shade, to bear fruit, to be part of the ecosystem. A bird is meant to fly, to sing, to migrate. A knife is designed to cut. A clock is built to measure time. So doesn't it make sense that human beings with intelligence, emotions, and consciousness must also have some predefined essence that makes us who we are? For thousands of years, the greatest minds in history believed just that. The ancient argument, essence comes first, the idea that essence comes before existence, was most famously championed by Plato and Aristotle, two of the most influential thinkers in Western philosophy. Plato's theory of forms argued that everything in the world is just an imperfect copy of a perfect form that exists beyond reality. A horse is only a horse because it participates in the essence of horseness, an ideal form that exists in a higher plane. Aristotle, on the other hand, took a more practical approach. He believed that everything has a built-in purpose, which he called telos. A seed is meant to become a tree. A tool is meant to perform a function. And humans, Aristotle argued, have a natural purpose to achieve eudaimonia, or flourishing. This idea that we are born with an inherent essence, a purpose we are meant to fulfill, became the foundation for centuries of philosophy, religion, and even politics. But then, everything changed. The radical shift: what if existence comes first? Fast forward to the 19th and 20th centuries, and a new wave of thinkers shattered the old way of seeing things. Instead of believing that we are born with a built-in purpose, these philosophers made a shocking claim: we exist first. Then we define ourselves. The most famous proponent of this idea was Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism. He took the ancient idea and flipped it upside down. A knife has an essence first because it was designed to cut. A clock has an essence first because it was made to tell time. But humans? We were not designed with a specific purpose in mind. We just appear in the world, and it's up to us to create our own essence. Sartre's bold claim: no blueprint, no destiny. Sartre's philosophy was both liberating and terrifying. If we are not born with a set purpose, it means we are completely free to define our lives however we want. But with that freedom comes responsibility. If there is no divine script, no grand cosmic plan, then the weight of creating meaning falls entirely on us. And here's the problem: most people don't want that much freedom. The fear of radical freedom. Think about it: if no one tells you what to do, how do you know if you're making the right choices? Sartre argued that most people experience anguish when they realize they are completely responsible for defining their own lives. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. You feel the height, the possibility of falling. But Sartre says you also feel something else: the terrifying realization that you could jump. Now apply that to life itself. Every day, we make choices that define who we are. And yet, because of this overwhelming freedom, many people choose to avoid responsibility altogether. Sartre called this bad faith, when people deceive themselves into thinking they don't have freedom, so they can avoid the burden of making real choices. Example 1. The waiter who becomes his role. Sartre gives the example of a waiter who acts too much like a waiter, moves mechanically, exaggerates his politeness, plays the role as if he has no choice. But in reality, he is choosing to play this role. He is hiding from his own freedom because it's easier to just be a waiter than to face the terrifying possibility of being anything else. Example 2. The person who follows society blindly. Think about someone who says, "I can't quit my job, it's just who I am." Or, "I have to get married and have kids because that's what people do." These are not actual truths, they are ways of avoiding the weight of making a real choice. According to Sartre, every time we tell ourselves, "This is just the way things are," we are lying to ourselves to escape responsibility. Essence or existence, which one wins? So, where does that leave us? On one side, you have the idea that humans have a fixed essence, a built-in meaning that we were meant for something greater, that our purpose is already written. On the other side, you have existentialism, which argues that we are born as blank slates and must create meaning for ourselves, but that doing so requires us to face radical freedom and take responsibility for every choice we make. This debate is not just abstract philosophy, it affects how we see ourselves, how we live, and even how we handle life's biggest questions. And here's the real challenge. If existence comes first, and there is no built-in meaning, how do we create meaning for ourselves? What happens when someone refuses to define their own essence? And if we are truly free, why do so many people still feel trapped? The weight of freedom, how existence shapes our lives. If Sartre was right, if we are not born with a fixed purpose, then what does that mean for how we live? At first, it sounds liberating. If there is no script, no divine blueprint, then we are completely free to choose who we become. But as we saw in the last part, freedom isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a crushing weight. And that's exactly why most people spend their entire lives running from it. The trap of predefined identities. Let's be honest, freedom can be terrifying. If you truly believe that you are responsible for creating your own meaning, that means every choice you make matters. And that kind of responsibility can feel overwhelming. That's why most people take the easy way out. Instead of actively defining who they are, they accept a pre-made identity. Think about it. Society gives us labels: student, employee, mother, father, citizen, and people accept them without question. People say things like, "That's just who I am." But is it? Or is it just easier than questioning everything? Many choose roles because it saves them from having to decide. Better to be a successful businessman, a good wife, or a hard worker than to face the existential void of total freedom. Sartre called this bad faith living, as if you are not truly free, pretending that you have no choice. And here's where it gets even scarier. If you don't define yourself, someone else will. How society exploits our fear of freedom. The idea that existence comes first should mean that we are all radically free. But in reality, most people are conditioned from birth to believe they are not. Governments, religions, corporations, even our families, they all try to define us before we define ourselves. Religious teachings. Many religions tell people who they are before they even ask the question. You are a believer. You are a sinner. You are part of God's plan. But existentialism says, you exist first. Then, you decide who you are. Cultural expectations. Society tells you what success looks like. A stable job, a family, financial security. But what if your meaning doesn't fit that mold? Existentialism forces you to ask, are these really my choices, or have I simply accepted them? Modern work culture. You are told that your job is your identity. That success means working yourself to exhaustion. But existentialism asks, if existence comes before essence, why should I let my paycheck define me? The existential crisis. When people wake up sooner or later, many people wake up to this reality. They realize they've been living according to someone else's script. And when that happens, they face an existential crisis. The corporate worker who realizes their entire identity was built around their job, but now they feel empty. The lifelong believer who starts questioning whether their faith was chosen or inherited. The high achiever who did everything right, but still feels lost. This crisis comes from the terrifying realization that you are truly free, but that means everything you thought you were might be an illusion. The burden of responsibility. Why people fear freedom. The moment you accept that existence comes first, everything changes. There is no universal meaning. There is no grand purpose. There is no destiny. There is only you and the choices you make. And that's why Sartre argued that most people will do anything to avoid true freedom. They blame society. I can't change my life, the system is rigged. They blame their past. I had no choice but to become this way. They wait for a sign. One day I'll figure it out. But existentialism says, there are no excuses. If you exist, then you are responsible for defining yourself whether you like it or not. So, how do you define yourself? Sartre's philosophy gives us two paths. 1. Live in bad faith, pretend you are not free. Accept society's labels. Avoid responsibility. Live as if life has a set purpose, even if it feels empty. 2. Embrace radical freedom. Accept that life has no predefined meaning. Take full responsibility for who you become. Create your own values instead of inheriting them. Accept that mistakes, failures, and uncertainties are part of the process. Most people choose the first path because it's easier. But the second path? That is where true freedom lies. So the real question is, if existence comes before essence, then what will you create? And if we are truly free, why do so many people still feel trapped? The anxiety of absolute freedom, if we are truly free to define ourselves, why does that freedom often feel like a burden instead of a gift? Jean-Paul Sartre argued that when people realize there is no fixed essential divine plan, no external force dictating their purpose, they experience existential anxiety. This isn't just ordinary stress. It's the deep, unsettling feeling that everything is up to you. Why freedom creates fear at first? We think we want freedom. But then, when we get it, we panic. A graduate who can choose any career path feels overwhelmed instead of excited. A person who leaves their religion feels lost, not liberated. A worker who quits their job to follow their dreams feels paralyzed because now, there's no one else to blame. Freedom forces us to confront the terrifying truth. There is no right answer. Every choice defines who we are, and every path we don't take is one we lose forever. This is why Sartre said, man is condemned to be free. Escape through distraction. Most people can't handle this weight, so they seek escape. Distractions, social media, entertainment, endless scrolling. Authority figures, politicians, religions, ideologies that tell them what to believe. Pre-made identities, attaching themselves to careers, social roles, or rigid beliefs to avoid questioning who they really are. But existentialism says, there is no escape. Even choosing not to define yourself is still a choice. The only way out: creating meaning. Sartre's answer to this crisis. Create your own essence. If there is no inherent purpose, invent one. If life is absurd, embrace the absurdity and live anyway. If freedom feels like a burden, turn it into an opportunity. This is why existentialism is not just about philosophy, it's about how you choose to live every day. But this leaves us with one final question. If meaning is something we create, then how do we make sure it's real? So where does this all lead? We started with a question. Do we have an essence before we exist, or do we create ourselves? Ancient philosophy told us that we are born with a purpose, that we have an essence waiting to be fulfilled. But existentialism shattered that idea, forcing us to confront a harsher, more unsettling truth: we exist first, and only then do we define who we are. There is no cosmic script, no universal meaning, no path laid out for you, and that is both terrifying and freeing. What will you do with your freedom? Sartre argued that once you understand this, you have two choices. 1. Live in bad faith. Pretend you are not free. Cling to external labels. Follow society's expectations without question. Let others define you. 2. Own your existence. Accept the responsibility of freedom. Define your own meaning. Create your essence through action, not through waiting. And here's the truth most people avoid. There is no right answer. No philosopher, no book, no ideology can tell you what your meaning should be. That is your burden and your power. Because in the end, you are not what you think or what you feel. You are what you do. If this got you thinking, there's more to explore. Check out our next video about Nietzsche's concept of the Superman, his radical response to the challenge of creating meaning in a world without gods. Because existentialism is just the first step. The real challenge begins when you decide what to do with your freedom. There are also many other videos on our channel on various deep topics that you might be interested in. Subscribe and put a bell so you don't miss anything. You can also write in the comments what topics you'd like to see in a video. Have a nice day, everyone, and see you soon, only more interesting.